Good evening and welcome to the Transportation Commission meeting on Monday, February 10th. And I'm calling this meeting to order at 6 o'clock p.m. Jennifer, could you please do a roll call?
Skylar.
Here.
Mark.
Here.
Andy.
Here.
Brett.
Here.
And Brooke.
Here. Okay, I am seeking a motion to approve the agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. Is there any discussion on the agenda? We don't have a lot on there tonight, but okay. If there's no discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now is the time for brief announcements from city staff, commissioners, and council member liaisons. We don't have a council member liaison tonight, so staff have any announcements?
Yeah, I've got a few things, and I think the first one is actually that the new council liaison with the Transportation Commission is going to be Linda Dios, and it's not going to be Paco. Unfortunately, she could not make it tonight. The next thing I have is both Faye and Tricia are no longer on the commission. So Mark is no longer an alternate and is a standing member. A few months ago, we talked to you about a street sweeper that could be towed behind a bicycle. It's kind of a trailer. We did want to let you know that that has not only been ordered, but it is in, and we'll be looking for opportunities to get it out into the community over the next few months. I'm working on a kind of cooperative project with the university and Caltrans for a sensor project. They were both looking to test bicycle and pedestrian detection devices that are used at traffic signals, primarily for counting and as turning movements and kind of being able to get accurate data on bike and ped activities. We are looking at 3rd and B Street as a candidate location they can use. Davis was attractive to them because we have a large number of bicyclists in the community. What they're really looking at is the accuracy of the devices, which is something that I really am interested in as well. If we had accurate bike and ped count data for different uses, especially at traffic signal timing, we could make our time signals in a way that is a lot more responsive. And we're hoping that this project will help kind of determine what the accuracies are and how these devices will be used in the future. There is a ATP grant we talked about a couple meetings ago that has been submitted. This is a grant for Caltrans planning sustainability to put together an active transportation plan and kind of update what we've got in the Beyond Platinum plan for the city. Looking at multimodal devices, looking at updating kind of the infrastructure and the bike network, as well as other things in town. As we hear about that grant, we will keep you updated. At the last city council meeting, there was an item on consent to introduce an ordinance for an all-way stop at 6th and C Street. I wanted to bring that to your attention. There will be a second reading for that ordinance at the next meeting of the council. And if it's approved, that would go in effect 30 days after its approval. And then at that last meeting, the city council also approved the standard update and design exception item that you guys had seen probably 2 meetings ago. And it included the comments and incorporation you wanted specifically about what was not a minor update that could be modified in the standards and needed to come back to both your commission and the city council for further action. And those are my updates.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Jennifer, was there anything for you? Okay, are there any announcements from commissioners? Andy?
Just a few quick updates on YOLO TD matters. I believe it says February 18th. I'll start. Late last month, they had an event, like a pop-up event, showing what their proposed Woodland Transit Center downtown at 2nd and Court Street would look like, where they staged some buses like at the existing stops and solicited feedback from the community. And then it will be February 18th coming up. Will be that's when that item will be in front of the Woodland City Council. Then there's been some there's some clear like support and from their survey results. They've gotten a sense that folks who use transit support the transit center, but folks who don't use transit oppose relocating the transit center downtown. So that should be an interesting discussion. And the survey also remains open on YOLO TD's site if any of you all are interested in weighing in. Also, for the CAC, our next meeting is coming up that'll be March 3rd at 6 p.m. at YOLO TD headquarters in Woodland. And per our long-range calendar, a couple items folks may be interested in. One is an update on the YOLO Active Transportation Corridors project, which is they got a federal planning grant to plan a network of intercity intercity multi-use paths. So that could be of interest to folks here. And then also there's public comment open on an expansion of the Winners microtransit service, which also doubles currently as the only transit connection of any type between Davis and Winners. That's another matter that folks may be interested in. And then last but not least, the express service expansion that I'd spoken about at prior meetings is now operational. So that's tailored around folks commuting to Sacramento. Now it's 3 round trips per day on Route 43, which serves East Davis, Route 230, which serves West Davis, and then newly restored Route 44, which serves South Davis. So if you commute into Sacramento, that option is now available to you.
Great, thank you, Andy. Are there any other announcements from commissioners? Mark?
Yeah, I actually ended up sending an email to the Transportation Commission and several folks on city staff and city council, and I learned earlier today that didn't arrive. So I'll briefly summarize. The email detailed 2 collisions and 4 instances of drivers running red the last 19 days during times when kids go to school, something that we've talked about before. 2 of them were collisions that involved me. The second one involved me while I was backing my kid home. And I think it's important to make sure we document this and everybody's aware that as we're all working together to make our streets safer and more inclusive, we realize that there is a task ahead of us that we should not shy away from. But it's the reality that I experience daily on the bike. Even though this is Davis and Davis is better than most places in California, is not always the rosy nature of what I hear us talking about in public. And just a reminder that we, I think, want to continue to do better than we are. The work never stops, and I think we have lots of room for improvements. When the email gets sent around to all of you, just basically documents what happens. There's some video there. You can judge for yourself. You can see it. Nobody got hurt. There's lots of lessons to be learned from these instances, which is why I do what I do, so that we know the reality is not just what people who are sitting in this room experience, but also the kids, for example, who we hope to bike to school independently, and maybe the barriers that what is happening on the streets prevent them and their parents from opting. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Any other announcements? There's no other announcements.
Brooke, Lindsay has an announcement about one of her programs, sorry.
Okay, Lindsay?
The Polar Pedal is going strong, which is a program at our elementary schools to encourage them to ride their bikes. Since February is traditionally our colder, wetter month here in Davis. And for the first week, they traveled over 2,000 miles collectively to school. And we've been working cooperatively with DJ USD Nutrition Services to hand out hot chocolate, and that has also been a positive experience so far.
Great, thank you very much. At this time, I'm going to open up the meeting for public comment. Any member of the public may address the commission on matters which are not listed on the agenda or listed on the consent calendar. Speakers will be limited to no more than 3 minutes. If you have a comment, please come to the podium and state your name for the record.
I'm Earl Bassard, a North Davis resident since 1986. I served on the Bicycle and later City Council Transportation Advisory Commission for 14 years. This family-friendly, mostly flat route, that is for the North Davis Bike Loop that I've got a new video for. I'm going to pass out some information on it. It's safe, family-friendly, mostly flat route, follows parks, green belts, and mature shade trees and amenities, including 7 playgrounds, tennis courts, 3 public restrooms, a basketball court, 4 lending libraries, and numerous picnic tables, benches, and drinking fountains. Minimal public expense will be needed to activate this route because it utilizes existing municipal infrastructure and require only signage and some pavement markings, although it would greatly benefit for some repaving of some of the asphalt. I have revised a YouTube video called The Proposed North Davis Bike Loop, the first 3 minutes of which introduces the proposal with several maps and photos, and the next 6 minutes present mainly photos and a few maps to show amenities on the bike loop. A short bonus video shows innovative bicycle infrastructure in Houten, the Netherlands, some of which would be well suited to Davis to make it a truly great world example. And the sheets that I've been delivering here have a link that will pass you down to the new video. I also wanted to make a recommendation to anyone interested in bikeway planning that they get the Urban Bikeway Design Guideline book. Just came out last month. It's got loads of great information. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate you bringing that back to our attention. Does staff have any comments regarding that?
So we are working on updating the wayfinding signs and finishing that program to sign throughout town, and that will include many of the locations that Earl's talking about. We don't really have any plans right now to expand the Davis Bikeway Loop like that, and it's not a project that we're actively working on.
Thank you for the update. Is there any other public comment? If there's no other public comment, then we'll move on to the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are non-controversial and to be approved with one motion. I think the only item we have today is the approval of the minutes from our last meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes on the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next are our regular agenda items. These items will receive a presentation. The commissioners will have a chance to ask clarifying questions about the presentation and staff report. Please hold your comments and discussions until after we hear public comment. Commissioners must be open to new ideas and listen to public comment. After public comment, then we can then discuss the item and provide our own comments. With that, I'd like to turn over to Lindsay Terry to give us a presentation on the City of Davis Safe Routes to School program.
Sure. Brooke, I'm just going to do a quick introduction of Lindsay. Lindsay is a new hire, and we're so grateful to have her on our staff. She's our new Safe Routes to School coordinator. She's been with us for less than 6 months, right, Lindsay? Oh, less than 4. And she has hit the ground running, and I'm so excited for her to showcase her program to you all tonight. So, go ahead, Lindsay.
So I'm Lindsay Terry, and I am the new Safe Routes to School coordinator as of about mid-October. I've never presented in this format before. I'm used to presenting to 5th graders, so hopefully I can reflect what I know accurately. And when Jennifer said I was going to introduce myself, I took it quite literally, and I was like, ooh, a slide about me. So I am a lifelong resident of Davis. I grew up here. My parents still live here. One of my sisters lives here. My children have attended DJUSD schools. My background is primarily as a classroom teacher. I was a teacher for 15 years. I also have authored some curriculum, which will become relevant later. And I pretty much always ride my bike or take the train. And I decided that some of my favorite things as a Davis local, I like to eat at Zuma Poke and go out to Park Winters. And one of these days I have a goal to ride my bike out to Park Winters, actually. So all that is to say, so basically I wanted to give just a very brief history of the Safe Routes to School program, what my role is and who I work closely with, what we do with the Safe Routes to School program, some goals and challenges that I've identified for the program, and then just some upcoming events and opportunities for people who maybe want to volunteer or get involved with the Safe Routes to School. So just very briefly, it launched in 2007 in response to like a cluster of collisions, basically, and then fast forward to 2014, there was a audit that was done of walking and biking in Davis, and one of the recommendations was to create a Safe Routes to School coordinator. Over the years, it's sometimes been called Street Smarts, sometimes called Safe Routes to School. We're largely not using the Street Smarts title anymore and focusing on the Safe Routes to School. And the position is funded by the City of Davis General Fund. Some of its origin was elsewhere, but that's where it sits firmly today. So my primary role as a Safe Routes to School coordinator is to educate and encourage K through 12 kids. That's my entire adult life I've spent educating kids, hopefully teaching them to self-advocate and be independent and how to sort of navigate the world. And the Safe Routes to School coordinator, that's a big part of what my role will be here. Of course, I don't do it alone. At each elementary site, we have an active For Me volunteer coordinator who also works with additional volunteers. We have volunteers that help us run a lot of our bike education and other programs. We work with Bike Davis and other bike advocacy groups here in town, and actually as far out as Sacramento. And then, of course, City of Davis staff, and not to forget the Davis Police Department, who I also work with, since it has to do with safety. And this is just a overview of the Safe Routes to School network. Part of what we do is have some routes that we suggest our school-age students take in order to safely navigate Davis, or most safely, hopefully. And we're really, a big part of what I do is to encourage students and their parents to use active modes to get to school and do activities in town, go shopping, and most things around Davis via bike, walking, scooter, and some public transit as well. So primarily, and of course, because I'm talking about school-age children, their parents are also a factor, obviously, but my primary focus is on school-age children, pre or TK through senior high. Of our population, 22% is under 18, so it's about a quarter of our residents that I am focused on educating and encouraging. And of course, each age group is a very different sort of age group. And so that's another, something that my education background is useful for. I've worked with pretty much all age groups. And of course, what someone who's, say, a pre-kindergartner who's not really riding a bike independently, they're not out on the road without an adult, needs something very different than a high school student who is hopefully riding their bike and walking purely, like fully independently, going to school, but also after-school activities, and doing things on the weekends, and everything in between. Basically moving from a high dependence on their parents to get them places to being pretty independent and helping to foster that and building their skills for independent bike riding and walking, and also how to maintain their bike. So, it's a fully, all the facets that come along with riding the bike. And right now, a lot of the focus of the program is on elementary schools, and I'll be talking more about sort of how that looks. So what is the plan to encourage and educate youth to use active transportation? So this is sort of an overview of some of the programming that Safe Routes to School has traditionally done. Active for Me is a big one. We do helmet giveaways. This spring and annually there's a bike rodeo, which is a hands-on education program that happens after school. Polar Pedal that I mentioned earlier. Loopalooza, which is a kickoff to May is Bike Month and encourages people to ride our bike loop. Different back to school activities, getting books about bikes into libraries to really encourage sort of kids thinking about using bikes and other active transportation. We have the maps I mentioned. There has been summer camp education opportunities because a lot of our summer camps through the Parks District involve a bike riding element. And then there's been both teen after-school mechanics classes and also upcycling bikes for sale and teaching teenagers how to repair bikes. So part of the plan is through social media. Primarily since I've started, I've been creating social media posts both about bike safety generally and more specifically about events that are going on. So the item on the left is a safety-oriented safety tip post about wearing layers so that when you're out riding during the winter. And then on the right is just getting, hopefully, families excited about participating in Polar Pedal. And the city's communication team receives those from me and gets input and then posts them on the various social media platforms for the city. Also, part of the plan is to continue partnering with the Davis Police Department. In December, we did helmet safety check events at all elementary sites, and we also included DSIS and Peregrine. And we distributed helmets. We've checked helmets for proper fit, educated students and their parents a little bit on how a properly fitting helmet looks. Interacted with about 400 individuals of all ages. And then the Davis Police Department will also be partnering with us on March and April's bike rodeos. And Sergeant Ranger wrote a grant to buy a bike fleet so that we can bring bicycles to the bike rodeos. So students who either don't own a bike or maybe couldn't get their bike to school can still participate and make it a more equitable educational experience for all of our students. And so we work cooperatively on that. We just found a trailer and we're good to go on that. So I'm pretty excited about being able to offer that educational experience to more kids. And then if you're not familiar with Active for Me, it's students register at the beginning of the year. Their parents register them really more accurately. They receive a little scanning tag, and then when they get to school, they check in with a volunteer scanner, and it sends a text to their adults letting them know they arrived safely at school. And in addition, it captures information about how far they traveled, how much carbon emissions were reduced through their active transportation, money saved on gas, and then it also tracks students and sort of like their classroom and grades. We can have some information about who's riding their bike, who's using Active for Me, all that kind of information that can be helpful for future planning. And it's supported and run almost entirely by volunteers at the elementary school sites with some support by me. And then I included this because when I first started, I was just kind of curious about Active for Me and if there were any trends. And so this is data for the last 3 years, the total number of participants at each site that have been registered for Active for Me. And then the fourth column, which is percent of students, that's the percentage of students at that school that participate. And so as you can see, it ranges from about 16 to almost 40% of the school population. And that's also something I'm going to talk a little bit about later, but I just thought it was interesting, and an important part of talking about the program is what percentage of the school we're talking about who participates. And as you can see, there's generally been a trend towards fewer participants for a variety of reasons. And this is just a graphic that we found where I got my information about students. And so let me go back. So the reason I did percentage from last year and not this year is because I have this graphic which showed the total population at each school, and I thought it was more accurate information than I could find for this school year, so I wanted it to be accurate. And so some of the features of this graphic are not just total enrollment, but students who are residents of the school area where they attend, and numbers of students who maybe are not attending their neighborhood school and perhaps coming from communities around Davis to attend the school. And so this just came from one of DJUSD's reports that they did about enrollment trends at DJUSD. And I thought it was kind of interesting because I think it helps give some of the picture about the participation that we've been seeing. So what are the goals? And I also kind of tied in that a little bit, like some of the challenges. And again, I've only been here for about 4 months, so I'm still learning things and meeting people and reading lots of documents and finding out about plans that are in place. So this is based on the picture that I have right now. A big one is looking at Active for Me and thinking about could we offer incentives for students? Are those the right incentives, right? Are we seeing a change in behavior based on them? There's constraints to finding volunteers that can be at school every morning to scan and keep the program going. And then also in talking to, because I had a couple meetings when I first started with our Active for Me coordinators, that older elementary schools are less likely to participate, sometimes because they don't want to, and sometimes, their adults are a little bit less concerned because they've grown more independent and they're trusting that they got themselves to school safely. So this is just one of my goals, has to do with kind of learning about what's working with Active for Me and what might need improvement. And a big part of that comes from talking to the volunteers who've been running the program, some of them for many, many years. In fact, some of our volunteers don't have students at the school anymore where they volunteer. So future goals include a parent survey to get some more information about how parents feel about active transportation in Davis, some of their concerns and things that they are excited about, and developing something to give us some real good information about sort of planning safe routes to school, expanding teen engagement. You probably heard me say elementary school over and over again, and that's because a lot of the focus has been in that area, and I would like to engage and expand the bike education elements, and also build some bike advocacy for teenagers or in our teenage citizens. I also, there is a in-classroom bike curriculum that I would like to potentially revise and find a way to bring to our students. And I'm also working with a bike pedestrian policy working group to introduce it as a standard, some kind of bike pedestrian curriculum, making it basically a required standard for students in California. Not specifically this curriculum, but a curriculum of some kind. I've been talking with, again, Sergeant Ranger about doing some driver education for adults and teens, increasing awareness of where our safe routes are and how to be more aware of where our bicyclists and pedestrians are. I kind of already said about Active for Me. And then also I want to evaluate and revise the Safe Routes to School program goals because I've read them for the first time and wondered how relevant they were because they were written when the program first started. And so I want to sort of evaluate those and see if anything needs to change and be updated and are they still serving the program best. We have some upcoming events, March and April bike rodeos. April 6th, Cesar Chavez Elementary is having a bike swap that is open to all elementary schools, really all schools, but especially all elementary schools in Davis to participate. May is Bike Month, so we'll have a lot of bike events there. I'm working on a display for City Hall about May is Bike Month. May 4th, of course, is our Loopalooza. And then May 7th is Bike and Walk to School, or Aren't You Glad You Came to School, or rode to school rather, where we pass out fruit in cooperation with the YOLO Food Bank. And that is everything. I feel like I've been talking for a really long time. And so if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them now, or I'll write them down and get back to you if I don't know the answer.
Thank you very much, Lindsay, appreciate it. Are there any clarifying questions from commissioners? Mark?
We're going to be discussing this in more detail later, correct?
Yes, there'll be some, we'll be giving some feedback on it, but hopefully for staff and Lindsay. I just had a couple questions from the presentation. Was, why do you think that the Active for Me is trending down? And is it just the Active for Me, or is it overall biking to the school sites?
So I'm hesitant, honestly, to offer an answer only because I feel like we need more information. I feel like a parent survey would, and the audit also that was done was from 2014. I feel like there's more information to be found, but also if you look at, for example, enrollment overall in DJSD, it's declining, so it could just be a natural offshoot of that, but I couldn't say for sure, but it's something that I definitely would like to find an answer to. I know that's probably not a very satisfying answer, but.
The other question I had was, you mentioned the upcycled bikes that were, I guess, repaired. How are those distributed or sold? I mean, are those something that's at the bike swap, or are those sold through, you know, other, I mean, where do those bikes go? Or are those just bikes that are personal bikes?
So Jennifer, I'm not sure about, I know that Martin Luther King Jr. High School is the ones who do the upcycling, but where do those bikes go?
It's the MLK youth program through the high school. But we'll find more information about where they go.
Yeah, I was just curious, like, are they sold, or are they distributed to students who don't have bikes, or they, you know, what happened?
We'll get back to you on that.
Okay, I'm just curious on that. Mark?
Quick clarifying question. Lindsay, and welcome, by the way. I've already interacted with Lindsay several times and had really good conversations. So I'm glad you're in this role. The clarifying question for now is, you list 15,000 kids under 18. DJU is the enrollment was 8350 last year, and there seems to be just a disconnect, and it's neither here nor there, but it's probably helpful to kind of figure out where that is, where that originates.
Do you mean that chart?
I think you listed 15,000 children under 18, or people under 18, and it seems to be high relative to the number of DJUSD enrollees, which don't include the
Oh, I mean, obviously some of the people under 18 don't attend DJUSD schools. I believe that information came from the census.
Okay, that's accurate.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
And Lindsay's program extends beyond DJUSD as well. It's all school-age children.
Any other clarifying questions before we move on to public comment? If there's no other clarifying questions, is there any public comment on this item? And please just come to the podium there and state your names.
Hi, my name's Trish Price, I'm with Bike Davis, and we think that, Lindsay's great, we're already working with her, we have been on Loopalooza for quite a while, well, a few months, a couple months. We would like to have not only incentive and encouragement programs, but also see some motorist enforcement, because most of our schools have pretty risky pickup and drop off areas, and they're very busy. A lot of people do drive their kids to school, so we would just like to see a little bit larger component of enforcement of motorist behavior in the safe routes to school, because we don't think you can have a safe route with 7,000-pound vehicles interacting with 70-pound children on 12-pound bikes. So, but we definitely support the safe routes, and I can speak to the Active for Me. I've been involved with Active for Me for more than 10 years. The percent of kids riding to school has not changed too much. It was always in the 25 to 40% range. So the numbers are smaller, but the percents are holding pretty steady over since 2011 when we started. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
I agree with what the previous speaker just said. And from my experiences in the Netherlands, I've seen the crowded scenes at elementary schools where parents bring cargo bikes full of young kids to school. And I would like to see that someday Davis evolves to a situation we could be like that. And that I would hope that the Safe Routes to School people could do more to put pressure on having safer conditions around the schools. Because I think many of the parents drive their children to school not because of the problems on most of the route, but the problems right at the school itself. So I think that's an area that should be dealt with.
Great, thank you. Any other public comment on this issue? Okay, if there's no other public comment, I'll open up to discussion from commissioners. Is there any discussion?
I'd like to mention some of the points brought up here by the members of the public, and just point out, I live very close to a school, to Holmes Junior High, and yes, it's chaotic, and there are a lot of cars, and it can be unpleasant, and I think there's nothing that the Transportation Commission or that the city can do, but that a key partner that could be visited would be the school board, because the school district is in control of their campuses, and there's more that could be done on their end. And I would encourage anyone who's interested to go to school board meetings and advocate for this directly to them, as well as to us and to council and whoever else in the city.
Mark?
Maybe I can pick up on that comment because I actually have been making the argument that when the school district thinks about safety, which they do a lot, and there is lots of facets to that discussion, and they have a lot on their plate having to try and juggle all that, what is necessarily not on their radar is how kids go to and from schools. And there is a reason why in this country, even though Davis is probably safer than many places, I recognize what I'm saying here, there is a reason why there are a lot more accidents and fatalities in traffic. Fortunately, not that many in Davis, but every one of them is one too many, Vision Zero, right? Is because of traffic and how we just have work to do in aspiring to the situation in the Netherlands, which also didn't happen overnight. The Netherlands was just as car-centric in the 70s as we are now. The cars then there on that street were smaller, but it was organized around cars, and we have the same situation, and they extracted themselves from that, and so can we. I agree with my colleague completely that I think we should hope and expect and advocate for our school board to take an active role, but at the same time, what they will tell you is, at the end of the day, the city is in charge of much of the infrastructure. I also don't think they're wrong. And there are changes that we can make. At Patwin, with Ryan Chapman and Jennifer, there were some changes made last year that actually ended up making the experience better, not just for the drop-off for kids, but also, maybe not even by design, for parents who drop their kids off by car. So that was a win-win. I think the bigger comment here, because I look at these enrollment numbers, and I know that the streets I grew up on, which is in the Netherlands, everybody bikes. Across town, everybody bikes. And the consequence of that is it's better for health, it's better for independence, it's better for traffic. It doesn't cost even a fraction of the wear and tear. But for those parents who have reasons to drive their kids to school because they're in the district, for example, it also benefits their drop-off. So everybody wins. This is not a bike versus car. This is a situation that if we have a vision where we have as many kids, particularly those who attend the neighborhood schools, go there by bike or walk or scooter or e-bike, like everybody gets ahead. Like that drop-off will not linearly, but at some point there will be a point where that drop-off will become really unobtrusive. And that's going to be better for everybody, including the residents who live close to these school sites. I think, and it's been brought up in comments too, it's also the comments I've been making consistently to my colleagues and to the city, I think the biggest barrier here is safety. It's confidence with cars. And it's what's probably keeping many parents and many kids from exposing themselves to the potential, very real potential of injury and collisions on the neighborhood streets. So while it's great that the city and others are advocating for teaching kids how to bike better, which is good, and they need that. I'm glad to see that finally there's now also some attention being paid to educating parents and other adults who drive kids around the same time. The people who I ended up colliding with or who ended up running red lights in the last couple of weeks, one of them was probably in their 60s and a neighbor behind the street. Another one was a mom dropping her kids off at Emerson, I think, because it was 8:31, she was running a red, and she was on her way to Emerson. One of them looked like she might have been a student, not a new driver. Meaning these are everyday people who look every bit like they're regular people in Davis, not somebody else, not some student, not some young kid. It is everybody. And I think the point that was made in public comments is about enforcement. People get sloppy, people are a little careless, people get a little hasty because they can, and there's no risk of consequences. And with that comes the real need to enforcement. And it's not that people are maliciously racing around, they just get a little careless, but a little careless with people who are vulnerable on the road is when injuries and accidents or collisions happen. And I do not blame people, parents in Davis, for just not trusting their kids to go by themselves, not because they're kids, but because of the traffic that they're exposing themselves to. And I've been advocating for us to just be at least realistic about the streets and acknowledge that we have a challenge ahead of us, and then lean in and see how we can make it better for everybody. Because otherwise, I don't see these numbers go up. And lastly, to round this up, there is the policy goal should be not 20, 30% of the kids who live in district to sometimes bike. it really should be 70, 80, 90% of kids who live in district to bike every single day. So maybe my advice or my comment to Lindsay is if the data allow us to do so, in addition to counting the number of kids who sometimes, let's also express this relative to total numbers of trips and see if we can at least take a temperature where we are now and compare that to what people in Denmark, people in the Netherlands, people in other Northwestern European countries with 20 years ahead of us in street design, what they are able to achieve. Because they've been able to achieve big uptakes in overall bike ridership in years, not decades. And if we're serious about all of this, and we are, then we should also hold ourselves to ambitious standards knowing that others have been able to achieve those.
Thank you. Brett?
Welcome, Lindsay. Thank you for all the efforts that you're making and will make. Appreciate it. My son did the polar pedal several years in a row and got a pin for one of them. Can't remember how many. I think it was like 100 trips for the season. No, for polar pedal it wasn't for the year-long thing, right? But anyway, a couple of things have been brought up. Some context may be helpful. I thought it was interesting, and this is not a critique, but I thought it was interesting that DJUSD wasn't mentioned as one of the partners on any of your slides. You mentioned the police department, you know. Historically, there has been a disconnect, and the good news is the school board is different. Not that the school board previously wasn't a good school board, but new superintendent, new set of school board members. It's important because when we talk about the DJUSD making strides forward, we have a regular emailer that, you know, points out the bike rack situation at the school. Most of the schools do not have very good bike racks. I mean, unless you want to come back and just see a front wheel kryptonited to, you know, the 1960s style bike rack. And the school district has funds available. And this is where going to the school board and having a general, oh, you need to make things safer or need to make things better, the school board members look at each other, just like sometimes people come and get, you need to make cycling better. Like, oh, okay, we all have different light bulbs that go, you know, click on in our minds what that means. I think there's a role for this body to have some bite-sized proposals that are manageable. So if we said, you know, every year 50 decent bike racks, you know, installed in schools, something like that. I'm not saying we do that, I'm just saying bite-sized. There's also the bigger issue around, and I mentioned it briefly at the last meeting, when Cesar Chavez was undergoing its remodel, I, along with Brian Abenat, former city employee, met with school board members and some school staff and wanted some flexibility, wanted to work with them on creating a less car-centric school layout. And so while it's true the city is responsible for the roadway, but the design of the school itself has creates some constraints around what the roadway can look like. So for instance, 14th Street, we have money available and the plan is to redesign that. But if the school district insists that the Rockstar access points are for cars, then we're constrained. But again, it's a different school board, different superintendent. There are things on the table that could make the entryway less, you know, everyone sort of pedestrians, bikes, cars, all fighting for that same little piece of geography. And the reason I mention this is we have this opportunity where we specifically said, can staff parking not be right in the front of the school where all the bikes and pedestrians are trying to enter? Could it be on the side of the school? Because they were undergoing a fairly substantial remodel there. And there wasn't the interest. They said, no, the teachers need to park in front. Okay, well, once you have the teachers parking in front, then that creates the driveways, or creates, you know, this is where the cars access the school. And it became a bit of a problem. And I know that at the last meeting we talked about improved school design so that it would be safer for bikes and pedestrians to access the school. There's an opportunity for a partnership, but I think we have to step forward and give specific design suggestions rather than hope they'll figure it out on their own, because they have other things to worry about. Whereas if we come forward with a fairly well-vetted proposal that is doable, I think we will get some traction. But from the Netherlands, I mean, it's been mentioned, and I mentioned that Jennifer and I saw this firsthand during a study tour there. The parking at train stations, at schools, is on the side. If we think about, and I'm sorry, I'm going a little bit on my soapbox, but if you think about the Sacramento airport, what mode of transit or transportation gets you closest to the check-in? The buses are a couple road segments over. It's the cars. Cars are right there. But in Holland, they've made it so that the cars kind of park to the side. They're walking distance, it's fine. But the front of the entryways are for pedestrians and cyclists. We can do the same thing here, and that has a dramatic impact on the safety of kids entering and exiting. And I'll just have two specific points, and I'll kind of wrap up. Sorry, I'm going a bit long, but there's some backstory to this. On the Safe Routes to School network, you know, there was a map earlier in your presentation about suggested routes to school. One of the things that came up, call it 10 years ago, maybe 8, was we wanted to make sure that the lane markings were up to date. So if we say, hey kids, take this route to school, that the lines, the striping is good. We have a lot of striping that isn't good, and this idea came up. It was probably mine, that's why I'm still hanging on to it, haven't given up. But when we bid out to have things restriped, it's a cumbersome process, both for staff and then the entities that wish to bid for it. One of the ideas was, let's just hire a painting crew for 2 months, for June and July. They go, and whenever they see worn out striping, they just go ahead and paint it. So the bid process is, hey, bid for this, we want to hire one paint crew plus materials for 2 months straight, go and do your thing, give us a bid. We hire that crew, and they just go out and they just do it, and the priority would be anywhere on the Safe Routes to School network. Just something simple, and they get as far as they get, and it's not, you know, I apologize to the folks who want to restripe to the new street standards, but these sections wouldn't be hit anyway because they're not being repaved. It's not triggering that. So, but yeah, there's just so many segments where the paint striping is just not acceptable. I think I'll probably just leave it at that, but it's wonderful that you're there. What you're doing is really important to maintain where we are, and to get to the next level. I think this body can be of help with Ryan, Jennifer, and a variety of other people, Mike Davis. I mean, there's lots of groups that feel very strongly and will try to help. But I think it's important that we have bite-sized, actionable requests, you know, to move some of the infrastructure forward. But yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Brett. Andy?
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. Oops. Sorry. So first of all, I'd like to thank you for the presentation. Really great to hear about, getting up to hear about this program, getting an update on it, and great to meet you as well. I have biked out to and around Park Winners. I'd love to talk with you about that sometime. Getting back on topic here and picking up on some of these comments about the pickup drop-off lines, especially when I echo my colleagues here that I mean, I think when we have, I mean, despite like the excellent biking network that we have, I mean, that's the biggest obstacle to having safe routes to school in our community. I know, I think I recall seeing, I mean, it was a study, I believe, by AAA. So, I mean, mean, not a completely neutral source, but I remember there was this great irony where they essentially recommended, like, because there are too many parents dropping their kids off at school, recommended that no one should bike to school. Which is definitely one of the greater ironies that I've heard like in all of my work in transportation. So I think some food for thought has been some things that I've thought of, and I'd say one is like more of a carrot, the other is more of a stick. But starting with the carrot side, I'm thinking back to my own time in high school. I went to a school like in a pretty suburban area in East Sacramento. So I mean, not exactly a transit or bike friendly area. But I remember that they actually did have, like, instead, like, speaking to the issues of, like, teachers or even at the high school level, like, students parking at campus and the challenges that creates, there they actually had, like, a satellite just because of the constrained space in the neighborhood. They actually had, like, a satellite that was, like, some kind of church parking lot that had very little utilization, like, during the school days. So like the high school students who drove to school, as well as I think many of the teachers, would park there and then get like shuttled into the campus. One thought would be like taking a look at Davis in terms of maybe if there are places like away from campuses where there's like lightly used parking lots that are underutilized during the day where folks could park. And then ideally having those like near the Unitrans system where folks could then take the bus from there to school. And of course, like with students, I mean, we already have a great carrot with transit being fareless for everyone under 18, but maybe looking at incentives for staff to do that as well. And maybe beyond, I mean, of course, subsidizing the transit, maybe offering like some kind of a broader transit pass that would give them, I mean, not just for going to school, but if they choose to do that, I mean, could also have like a transit pass that they'd be able to use just in daily life as well, and that could be a life benefit. So that's one side, but then switching more to the potentially like stick aspect of it. It's something that I know at one of our recent meetings it came up in the context of like downtown parking and the ties. I mean, there's been a lot of talk and what happened with New York with congestion pricing, which of course, I mean, even early on has yielded like significant benefits for reducing congestion in Manhattan. And I know one of our meetings there was some talk of looking at pricing downtown parking with that type of context. But it could be that. Then again, I don't know of any specific examples, but it would be something I'd love to hear staff thoughts on, or if you know of anything, would be like if there are ways like to potentially like price, and I know that there would of course have to be like exceptions made for the inter-district travelers who have fewer options, but if there are like strategies out there for potentially these folks who are dropping people off at school and potentially like imposing a social cost essentially on people who are or would like to bike to school, looking at possibilities for pricing that to put more of an end to that type of cycle that the AAA study cited, where you have, because too many people are dropping their kids off, fewer people are biking. I mean, it could be the type of thing that could reverse that sort of cycle. So just food for thought there.
Thank you, Andy. I have this is a topic that's pretty near and dear to my heart. I had both of my kids were hit by cars on their bicycles on their way to school at different times, mainly through distracted drivers. So, and one not too seriously, one more seriously. So the idea of having well marked and safe routes to school is obviously very important, and any improvements that we can make along those lines, I think, will benefit the student travel. And also, I do agree too. Around the schools is a big issue that needs to be addressed, and a lot of that is driver behavior. Obviously, people who are in a hurry, who are going too fast, who are not, ironically, not paying attention to other people's kids. Because they're more focused on getting their own kids to school on time. So there is a lot of driver education and enforcement. I think that's a key component of all this. I think it would be good for us also, when we do talk about traffic safety at schools again. I don't know, Jennifer, was a year ago or 2 years ago, we saw a map of accidents and fatalities around town that sort of showed where they were occurring. I think it'd be good to see something like that that's related to school sites, and make sure that we can see what are the reported incidents around the school sites, so that we can maybe have a little bit better idea of that. And The only other thing, I know once before we mentioned, is the city meeting with DJUSD on a regular basis, and is there an ongoing dialogue there about traffic safety?
There is. And one of the things I was pushing for when I started was making sure we have frequent meetings with DJUSD. We meet once every other month when school's in session. We typically pick at school. We visit it normally in the morning when students are being dropped off, make observations or notes about anything that we can change as far as markings or striping or parking to try to address it, as well as deal with some of the other long-term type of needs and improvements that are necessary. That includes Jennifer, myself, it will include Lindsay. It also includes representatives from Davis PD and the school district. So we're really trying to kind of that education, engineering, enforcement approach to solving these problems.
Great. Jennifer?
Another thing I wanted to mention is that the local road safety plan does have a section about school-age children and the collisions that they're getting into by type and by age group. It breaks it down into, I think, 13 to 16 and probably less than 13 and then 16 to 18. And so you could see those trends around the school sites, and it looks at the suggested routes to school and where those collisions are occurring. I'll send it to you guys. I'll pull out those pieces and I'll send it to you probably tomorrow.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that'd be helpful for us to look at. Any other commissioner comments? Andy?
Just one last question is, I know at past meetings we've discussed that, like, with the implementation of the state daylighting law, that the Safe Routes to School network is one of the priorities for that. So I'd just be curious to hear if there's any update on where that's at, or potentially any thoughts on like how certain spots in that network might be prioritized for those red curbings and other treatments to help implement that law.
Yeah, so to date, all of the red curb downtown has been placed, and more importantly, all the you can park here signs have been removed, so that we're not sending conflicting messages. We are working in the school zones, and I'll figure out the school maps to try to identify locations. I've been prioritizing bike trails where they intersect with the street and making sure we've got adequate red curb there. We've also been dealing to requests as they would come in for specific intersections and locations.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Scott?
Yeah, one more little point, which is, as far as I can tell, talking to other parents, I think that the biggest or one of the biggest barriers to biking, either parents dropping their kids off by bike or kids biking themselves to my neighborhood school, which is North Davis Elementary, to from my neighborhood, which is the sort of Holmes neighborhood, is the, I've talked about this a few times, but the tunnel to H Street being just awful, and that, you know, actually is something that I think that the city could address and improve. And I know that there's a plan, but it's still bad.
Great, thank you. There's Mark.
Yeah, I have a few more comments maybe to tie this together. This has been really good listening also to the experiences from my colleagues. There's a question, what constitutes a safe street? And this is not a fair question to you, Lindsay, because you're not new to the role, but I think it's important that we articulate what does that mean beyond the yellow stripe on that. And what do we want it to mean? Like, we know that changing streets, particularly if it involves changing actual design, is not without its cost, and it's not going to happen overnight, but what do we envision a safe street to school to be? And I would articulate that we should strive for a class 4 protected bike lane, meaning physically protected from other traffic. If that's a long-term goal, can we at least take some of the conflict zones with vehicles and add some physical protections which are easier to implement on the short term? But because I think right now we don't have a good answer what it means. So let's articulate what that actually means and then put in place a plan to actually get there. Knowing that this is not overnight. I'm not asking you to do miracles, but I think it's important to do that. So there's one comment. Another one is, it was brought up, like, and Brett, you're entirely correct. The school district has a big role to play here, and how they do it and how they don't do it sends an important visual message. It is interesting to me that houses in Davis almost always have the garage as the prominent feature. And it's not something that people who are born and raised in America see, but it's so different. And it sends a signal, right? And you made the analogy here is how we design our places, and designing our places around cars like, gives an important signal, and it also gives an important signal what we actually don't value. So in that vein, we have on most school sites now solar canopies covering closed metal boxes. In most places, I think homes may actually be the exception. Those solar canopies are not placed where, for example, instead of cars, we can actually place bicycles, like have covered bicycle parking with the safe bike racks. I know that at Petway we have not only not good bike racks, we have just, if it's raining and it's pouring, these kids are coming in and taking a little plastic bag to try and keep their bike a little bit dry. It sends a very important signal what mode of transportation we value. So we should probably be working with the school district that, hey, what is it, like if we truly value biking to school, which we all say we do, well, that needs to also be reflected in how we design the place. And we should have as our goal, not only safe bike racks, but some covered bike parking at all school sites, so that we build for the traffic that we want, not for the traffic that we have. So there's that. And then basically, let's think back about incentives. My 6-7-year-old will be super happy with a pen or some other trinket, and that's fine. And it's, or a pair of gloves, which is fantastic. Maybe one way to actually get the older kids interested is to, back to the carrot and stick model, to incentivize them with some actual money. There are lots of models in Europe where people actually get paid for commuting to school or to work. And this is not, if you think about it, and if you communicate around it as well, we collectively all pay for that pavement, to maintaining all that expensive space for all these cars. There is a cost to that. That cost is right now not borne by the individual driving their car there. But what happens if we, you know what, maybe we should start charging some money for that expensive public good, city-paid infrastructure, or school board paid infrastructure, and then reroute some of that money back to the people, say high school kids or middle school kids, who bike to school, and give them $1 a day, rather than a pen or a backpack. I mean, because they actually save us money. They save us money on lack of wear and tear on the street. They save all of us money on healthcare, which is not coming up with the city coffers. I get that. But we all know that there's actually, there's studies done that say, like, every mile driven by a car we collectively pay, every mile ridden by a bike saves money. Well, we can probably do a much better job than we do right now in actually communicating and educating our community on this. And putting some incentives in place, using the carrot stick model to see if we can use that to shift the modes more than we are right now. And I would love to see us actually do that. I think if we want to change the need on transportation, we're going to have to do that. And then the final point to where we drop off, Petway, which is the school site that two of my kids go to, we actually try to encourage parents to park at Arroyo Park, which is a city-owned parking lot. And that worked okay. I think there is an opportunity there. But this model can work on other sites. I'm thinking of the high school where there's parking lots on the, I think it's on Covell on the north side, where you can just park there and just walk across a couple hundred yards of bike path, where you're in and out quickly if you have to drop off your kid there. You're not going to be contributing to what I imagine is probably going to be a mess over at Villanova and whatever the cross street there is, right at the prime parking. And, you know, if you make it a little harder for people to drive to the front of the school, and instead point at the easy option at the back of the school, you get your cars there, you get your traffic by cyclists, by bike to the front, you reduce the conflict. You maybe even have more space because you don't have the same volume of cars in Villanova, so you can actually build the infrastructure for bikes better and protect it physically. And that would then encourage more people, more kids to actually bike, because now you don't have to do this this obstacle run that is biking on unprotected bike lanes sometimes. And then the very last thing, and Lindsay knows this and Ryan knows this, bike lanes covered by whatever we want to store there, whether it's yard waste or whether it's delivery vehicles. It happens every single day. If we want our kids to use them, we should not just double down or not have our bike lanes be doubled for everything else that we need stored. There's pictures shared with the city of bike lanes that are basically year-round covered in big leaf piles on safe bike to school routes. Well, guess why kids are not using them? Because it's just not safe. So those are things that are easily enforceable that we should do. I mean, if we can get that done, if we can enforce existing rules, ordinances, and appeal to our fellow neighbors to just don't do that stuff and explain to them why and enforce them if we have to, then we also will not be able to make any headway in moving forward to actually getting the remote shifts and the increased participation of cyclists that we are hopefully trying to achieve under this program. So there's a lot of things coming at this. I mean, this whole topic clearly touches on many ways of public transportation. I think there's opportunities here, but I'm hoping that we can lean in and help Lindsay and the city really just be ambitious here because we kind of have to. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. I'll just add to Mark's also on those issues of enforcement is people using bike lanes as extended turn lanes around the school areas, which is one of my biggest complaints. So it's a danger and an obstacle. Lindsay, thank you again for your presentation. We really appreciate it, and looking forward to working with you more on the Safe Routes to School program. And hope the feedback tonight's been useful. And I'm looking forward to discussing this topic more on school safety and safe routes to school. So thank you very much for being here tonight. Okay, with that, we will move on to the long-range calendar. Ryan?
So yeah, I've got this one. So next month, we're looking for an update on the speed hump program. We're looking to talk about traffic study guidelines for new developments, as well as the Village Farms project and the traffic study for that should be coming up soon. In April, I'm hoping to have an update for you on the Mason I-80 project. I need to change that title. It's not going to involve the I-80 metering. We're going to have a discussion about an update for 5th Street intersections of I, J, and K. At the last City Council meeting, there was a discussion about this. There's been a lot of discussion from Aldi's to Davis, a lot of concerns about collisions at those intersections, and we'll be coming in with a plan to help address those concerns and hopefully reduce the collisions. We'll also be talking about the Anderson Road, Chavez Roadway 32% design plans that Commissioner Lee was actually discussing a few minutes ago. May, I'm hoping to bring both moving transportation forward, which is a plan that looks at some of our goals and our hopes for the next 5 years, as well as traffic safety in your schools, and what we're doing kind of is interim and immediate to help address some of those concerns. And then in June, we'll be doing an update on transportation grants and grant funding. Again, just summarizing what we've received to date and what we're looking to do moving forward.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Are there any questions from commissioners on the long-range calendar? Brett?
I don't know if you're taking public comment, but I have like a couple suggestions.
On the long-range? Yeah, I think this will be the time.
So Earl has presented to this group and the previous incarnation of this group, the BTSSC, about the North Davis Bike Loop. We have this nice map designed by Russell. I don't know where a task like this, where the home of a task like this might be, but I think there's this, which I think would be relatively straightforward. Well, in the overall scheme of things, relatively straightforward to have some signage identifying, whether it's a couple of signs at a couple of the, sort of the multi-use path kind of intersections, just kind of showing, a potential loop for those of the people that are new to this area or new to Davis, sometimes a map like this might give people ideas, and they would discover that the bike network is actually quite interesting and varied. And one of the things, we talked about what constitutes a safe route. This route, relatively speaking, is very safe. Low volume roads, but also much of it just on regular greenbelt pathways where there aren't really, there are very, very few points of where there are cars intersecting with travel. And so this could be public service to new folks. Also, one of the barriers to cycling is parents who move here from other areas who aren't so familiar with the great infrastructure, and having a chance for them to go with their kids and discover like, oh, okay, I didn't realize how easy it is to get from one spot to Davis High or North Davis Elementary, or just kind of riding around. So there's this, and then it brings to mind, we all see this, especially during the beginning of this UC Davis school year, where somebody from South Davis rides over the Richards Overcrossing, and that is just one terrible section to be a cyclist. And there is a lack of information because there's the wonderful undercrossing of 80 just a few hundred yards away, but people don't know about it. And it's a similar sort of schematic or design, and strategically located places in South Davis could help avoid new UC Davis students or new residents who are located in South Davis from going over Richards, because the Richards from South Davis, to come to the tunnel, it's a challenging spot. Anyway, the reason I mentioned that is this isn't just about Earl's proposal. There are probably similar sorts of things where a couple of signs in strategically placed locations about certain positive features, I think would go a long way to improving safety and enjoyability around cycling. So I don't know where this would be, whether this is a long-range calendar item or whether this just might be staff just puts it in the July budget and just sort of farms it out, and somebody just makes a couple signs. But anyway, I just thought I would bring it up.
Brett, I kind of misspoke, but I'll put that as a clarifying question about that issue. It really should have taken, I sort of got that out of order because we are supposed to take public comment. But are there any other clarifying questions from commissioners on the long-range calendar? Okay, if not, I'll open up to public comment. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment on the long-range calendar? Okay, if there's no public comment, then is there any commission discussion on any other items regarding the long-range calendar? No.
Just wanted to thank you for getting the MACE item on there.
You're welcome. Thank you. Can I propose something for Brett's request? We are working on a wayfinding plan update that I was hoping to bring to you once we had the plan finalized by a consultant, as well as updating the bike plan, which would include all the elements you're talking about. And I think it would be wise to bring that back to you when it's actually ready. So we will work on finding a spot to get it on the calendar and bring it back to you kind of in that context.
Great, thank you, Ryan. Any other discussion from commissioners? If there's no more discussion, then I'll ask if there's a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you all for joining us tonight. And thank you, Lindsay, for being here.